I suspect a lot of you have got damaged front racks. This will show you how I fix mine. I'm going to fix this rack today. The damage sort of starts about there, so I'll cut through there and I'll cut up here somewhere. This little bit needs to be tweaked back from this joint, and this corner has been pulled around too much. So I'm going to cut it up here first and then use that as a bit of a handle to try and pull that corner back. And then I'll cut it off there. And then I'll put a new piece of tube in here, get that tacked in place. And then to make the rack fit in my truck, I'm going to cut it the same as I did the other one back here. Take 40 millimeters out of there, 40 millimeters out of the middle here, and cut it here, and 40 millimeters back here to shorten that rack up. This space is currently 80 millimeters. I want to make it only 40 millimeters, which is all it needs to be able to fit in my truck. So I'll get started with just a thin blade on the angle grinder. Okay, I made a cut here and cut a little bit more out so that I had room to move it. And then I've heated this corner so that this part here is sort of parallel to this part here. It needed that end pulled out that far to start to get this piece here parallel to there. The bend had cocked around like that quite a bit. So now I can cut it here somewhere, make some spuds up to fit in the ends. There's still a bend here, and you see that pipe is not pointing at that one. So we're going to apply a bit of heat here and bring that back. It's not a big enough handle and it's going to be hot, so I've made that out of an old spud to go up inside there, and I should be able to pull sideways on those vice grips when it gets a bit loose. When you've got a piece of tube like this that's blind at both ends, the spud, and when I talk about a spud, it's a bit of tube that fits neatly up the inside of the other tubes. The spud itself needs to be retracted into each half so that the piece can fit in, and then the spud needs to be moved along into the mating piece. And the way I've done that is I've drilled a hole in the top here, which will end up being filled with weld, and then a small hole in the spud below, and this one is actually now in position because I scribed the line around the hole as to how far I wanted it to go in. And I've used a punch in the small hole below to drive the spud along. And this one's along far enough now. This one's still got a way to go, so I'll drill another hole up this end, something that I can hit on to drive that spud in further. I think this one could go drill 2 more holes in it before it's in far enough. So that's what I'll do next. But that's how getting the spuds inside when you've got an open, when you've got a closed length of pipe, you've got to get the piece to fit in and drive the spuds in either way. When I come to do these ones, the whole rack will be removed, and so I'll be able to set a spud in one side on each and then just push the other thing up, but which is a lot easier than having to use this method to drive the spuds in. Okay, that's the spuds driven in. I'm pretty happy with how parallel and straight that now looks, and so it's ready to tack weld before I cut it off again to shorten it. And the shortening process is only something that suits me. I don't think anyone else is particularly interested in that, but I suspect a whole lot of people have got a few dings in their front bumper, and on my other bike I replaced it all the way along corner to corner and cut it away from the joint here But in this case, I don't think there's any need to do that, and it saved me interfering with this joint except heating it to get a little bit of the bend out of it. Well, that's it welded up there. Pretty shit as usual. Bit of a grind helps cover it, but there's a ding here that probably some of you have already noticed in the video. Little one. I'm not worrying about that one. There are other bends in the tube because of this front hit, but I'm not worrying about those either. They're not particularly bad. So the next thing is I've put a couple of marks there, 40 millimeters apart, and up this end, 2 marks there, 40 millimeters apart. Now what's going to happen there is I'm going to cut there and then cut through that weld on that side there. Same up here, there, and then cut through the weld there. That leaves more space here for the spud to enter before the bend. It'll be round tube just in this section, and obviously round tube up there. But if I move this down to a cut there and this up to here, you'd see that the spud's trying to go into a bend. Narrow, you can see that it's narrowed down because of the bend. So I'm not going to, it's better to move it back up there. That's something I learnt from one of the cuts on the other rack. That's partly tacked on in the centre. Distance between these two rails is now 40 millimeters. But thought I'd show you my chicken shit welding before it's ground. And so I've got to get around, I've got to manipulate this rack over and over to get in a good welding position on each of these welds. Because as much as I try, I can't weld in various positions. I do a shit job when it's set up perfectly, so that's it. That's the rack shortened up. Quick blast of paint. I was on the last of the can, so only got a bit of it done. But that joint there and these joints here have sort of disappeared into the mix. And she's fairly straight across the front except for the ding about here. These other rails ain't particularly straight, but that'll do. Job done. All in a day's work, so get out to your shed and have some fun.